mental health stigma, economic hardship, which can persisting mental health stigma and preventing individuals from seeking help. So we now go to the main thing we are talking about, reclaiming life from the grasp of depression and suicide. Depression would always become, people would always encounter or go through difficulties of life. We cannot, we will pass, we will fail. We won't get the contracts we want. We won't get the best of the jobs we want. But ability to function, that is it. So, and in some cases when people are down, you seek professional help. The Dr. Akinolas are there. Dr. Bonju is there. So many other professionals, apart from psychologists, who are doing counseling. So many other people, because we cannot handle it all. We cannot. I used to have the statistics of numbers of psychiatrists. I don't have any more in Nigeria. I know for psychology, we are about 200 and something registered over the country. All our nurses have gone. Psychiatric nurses, social workers, and all that. So there are so many people, so many professionals there outside in private practice, some even doing basic counseling that are helping out to address these issues. Then also support networks is very, very important, like I said. Build strong support networks for family, friends, and community members. We know the experiences we've been going through now in our generation. I remember growing up, once we vacate long vacation, that Friday I'm shipped up to my cousin's house. I grew up with them. We would be there till 2 days before school resumes. How long, how much our siblings now, how much our children relating with them. They don't even know themselves. First cousins, not to talk of second, third cousins. They don't even know themselves. So we should still find a way of building, because the family line is narrowing down. It's narrowing down with where we have found, yes, a lot of things over time has caused it. The social media has contributed. You know, if I ask one or two people, when last did you see your sibling? How long ago? Last week. Oh, that's good. Some people, it could be 2 months, 3 months, and they're in Lagos. It's only when there's a family party 3 times or 4 times in a year. We are talking on phone. But just physical meetings, sitting together, eating together, and all that, yes, we still have to still create. And that is what will build that bonding, even with the children. With the children, to keep it going. Then also to talk about economic empowerment, implementing initiatives promoting economic stability, such as good job training, education and entrepreneurship program. Everybody would not have a paid job. And that is where we are going now. Everybody might not get a paid job. Your ability to pick an area of interest and get new skills, get new things, new other areas that can even complement your job, what you earn. If you are doing 150,000 naira a month, as a single person, how can you live well with where we are now? Because averagely, unless you are living 2 or 3 streets away from your office, that's when you can spend 500 naira to get there. If you are living far, at least average of 3,000 for transport, you take it away in 20 days. How much is that? 3 times that, 60,000. You have how much left? 90,000. You want to save for the rent and so many other things. How do you care for yourself? So you look at some other source of income which could help you do well. Community resources, then also raising awareness also is another factor. Self-care. Promote self-care practice such as exercise, mindfulness, and also create activities for yourself. And take care of yourself. Spend money on yourself. The children will be fine. I keep telling people, the children will be fine. Their generation, everything is just all about them. It's about them. So how much do you give yourself? How much are you giving yourself? How much are you spending on yourself? Ask my colleague. I take care of I can be going up now. I'll go and watch film. I'll go and branch at the cinema. I'll watch film. I'll go. I'll go to, then when I used to take, I've stopped taking it anymore. Cold Stone. I will pack. I will buy for myself alone. Eat it before I get home. Yes. Buy for myself. Yes, I buy it for myself. Take care of yourself. Buy good things for yourself. Everybody, if anything happens to you, they will become lawyers. They will become doctors. They become engineers. God has his way of doing things. Most of our friends that growing up, that you feel your parents were okay, or they lost their father, they are the most successful. When you hear their stories, we take care of ourselves physically, mentally, emotionally as well. So government initiative also talks about advocating for government policy, addressing economy and mental health issues. Well, that's on the paper. That's on the paper. And I tell people, please, please, please take care of your mental health. I'm not talking about physical condition. Because physical condition is more and more expensive than mental health. Mental health is so expensive now. If you are going to get a patient admitted in our hospital now, it's 500,000. Dr. Alkela, ma? I said, if I'm going to get a patient admitted, the minimum you have now is 500,000 naira. I'm not saying luto, not for operation, no. You pay small. But if I want to bring somebody now, somebody had a breakdown, they brought them, and they woke me up around 11 a.m. You know, it must be complete. So even as mental health, because by the time you pay for registration, the things you're going to buy is running into over 100,000, and so we need to take care of our mental health and also our physical condition. Well, resilience building, I talked about that, access to health care. Well, to be sincere, access to health care, government has tried as much as possible to provide that. I can testify that. We have primary health centers here. We have teaching hospitals. Lagos State has been wonderful with that. You know, I was in Reachout not quite long. The equipment and everything, and you know, access to care. But even when it's just the education and information which we still need to build more, and that is part of the things we are talking about. If you need help, reach out, and people will be able to guide you. Then we need to be hope, develop hope, and also have purpose, and purpose through meaningful activities and also social connection. So in conclusion, we have to reclaim our life from depression and suicide. Suicide is not the way out. Depression, yes, things will come, but we have to have a way of developing our strength, ability to bounce back from adversity. Thank you very much. Yes. So, I just have to chip this in. I've been very sick for the past 2 to 3 weeks, seriously sick. And I didn't believe I was going to do this presentation. And that was why my colleague came with me that, let me try. If I feel I can't do this, I'll hand over to Ayo Ajayi. Because Mrs. Adebayo, you are special. I canceled all my engagements last week with oil companies, so many organizations I had. Dr. Bonju, I had to come to that program with my MD that day. It's been a roller coaster, but I had to do this for you. Thank you.
Let us keep appreciating him, please. Thank you very much, sir. Wow. All right. Before we proceed to our second speaker, I'd like to appreciate some dignitaries, some special guests in the house. We are all special, all right? Please tell the person sitting next to you you're special. You're very, very special. Thank you. I'd like to I'd like to appreciate our guest from NDLEA. Do we have representatives here? Please let us appreciate them. Thank you very much. Thank you for coming. From the educational districts, do we have representatives here? Thank you very much for coming. God bless you. And I'd also like to appreciate Mr. Godwin Ita. Mr. Godwin Ita is the facility manager for Paroche Rehab Center, Abeokuta, Ogun State. Let us appreciate him, please. Thank you for coming, sir. God bless you. We are trying to be as concise and precise as possible so that we can have all the speakers and then proceed to our panel session. So would appreciate that you please work within our allotted time so that we can have everybody before we leave this place and be able to take as many questions as possible so that we leave this place well loaded at the end of today. All right, so we move to our second speaker. The CEO of Ready-Made Consulting Services. She is going to be talking about prevention of childhood and adolescent depression. I'd like that you put your hands together as I invite on stage Dr. Bojubola Abiri.
So the Rosie Bears, Bojubola. It's fine. It is Omogbojubola. Thank you. Thank you very much. Interestingly, I rarely see anything about my name when it is wrongly done, but I like my name. People say it is Orukwa Agba, the name of old people that you rarely hear these days anymore. I'll stand on existing protocols. Good afternoon, everyone. And thank you very much for taking time out of your very busy schedules to be here. Of course, I'd like to thank the convener, Mrs. Adebayo, her husband. I'd like to thank those who have gone before me, Professor Makinde, we still saw a few weeks ago. My ogas, my esteemed teachers, Dr. Akinola, and Dr. Adira Tutu, as well as Dr. Ayodiji as well. Everyone here, of course, is well recognized. This afternoon, I'll be speaking to us about how we can prevent childhood and adolescent depression. And I dare say that there's someone in the crowd who is thinking, many years ago, we used to say that Nigerians were the happiest people in the world. We'll just shake it off, no problems. Nigerians will smile, we'll take it in our strides. And so while we're still struggling to understand how the happiest people in the world, Nigerians, could have depression, somebody somewhere is thinking, how can children be depressed? What are they even talking about? And so I'll start with a story. I always like to tell stories. In 2020, during the COVID-19 pandemic, one day I just noticed that my daughter was quite irritable. She was getting angrier than normal. She was 9 years old at the time. And so one day when I got home, she was fighting with her brother, keeping to herself, and I just called her. I said, Ire, come and sit down with me. So she sat down. And I said, I've noticed this over the past couple of days. Do you want to share with me what's going on? And she kept quiet. And she inhaled and exhaled. And she said, Mom? I said, yes. She said, I'm under a lot of stress. You see, that response of laughter was what I wanted to. It's what almost anyone would have done. You, 9-year-old, stress. In the middle of COVID, you're at home. You're not going out. You're not picking patients like me. You're not thinking about what to eat. But it just makes you understand that they have feelings too, and that they must not be dismissed. Of course, how we respond to what they say when they say it is also very, very important. I will build on the amazing work that my esteemed teachers have done ahead of me. And let's move on to slide 3. Slide 3 says, the icebreaker. I lie about being sick sometimes. I mean, we've seen vulnerability demonstrated today. Professor Makinde demonstrated vulnerability. Dr. Ajiro demonstrated vulnerability. And so it's easy to say that, oh, I have a cough, I have a cold, my arm is broken. But when people are depressed, it is difficult to admit that they are depressed. Let's move on. A couple of people often think that when people say that they are depressed, it means that they are crazy. When people say that they are depressed, some people think that it's bad days and sadness. Some think that when they say people are taking medication, it means that they are on medicine for life. Some people think that when people say that I'm depressed, though, it means that they're looking for self-pity. Of course, many people think that it is not an African man's sickness. Of course, we used to say that Nigerians were the happiest people in the world. And I remember many years ago, I saw a young lady called. She called on a Saturday. I remember where I was. And when she called, she said to me, she said, Dr. Bonju, I have ginger beer in front of me, and I also have sniper. She said, I am about to drink it. And somehow I was able to encourage her to go to the hospital. On Monday morning, her brother appeared, and he accused me of kidnapping her. We get a lot of that. And when I said, your sister has been depressed, she's struggling, he said she has no right to be depressed. We grew up in the same home. We went through the same things. How can she be depressed? But again, depression is not about weakness or defects. Depression is actually a very common and serious mental health condition. And it can affect anyone, regardless of age, gender, socioeconomic status, race, or religion. We must know that depression is a form of mental breakdown. Next 2 slides. I'll continue to go on, even if you don't catch up. The next slide. And I want to tell a few stories from the eyes of adolescents and young people. So a few weeks ago, I saw 20-year-old G. Her complaint was that she had irregular menstrual periods. And because her periods were not regular, what did you think her mother thought? She was pregnant. And so her mother had insulted her and said a lot of negative things to her. They had taken her to many labs for tests, pregnancy tests, but she never came positive. A doctor then requested for her to do a hormone profile. And that was when they found out that she had PCOS. PCOS is a medical condition known as the polycystic ovarian syndrome. Now at the age of 20, when she's supposed to be a hot babe, she's dealing with facial hair, acne, she has added so much weight, and she's unhappy about how she looks. She started struggling with schoolwork and has been keeping to self. When I saw her, the diagnosis is major depression. Let's move to the story of Jay. A few years ago, I worked on a project in one of the states in Nigeria. And on that project, I came across a young lady who I will call Jay. Jay was taken from her state, somewhere in Nigeria, to be trafficked to Italy for sex. She ran away at the airport, and she was living on the streets of Lagos before she was picked up and put into one of the homes. When I went to visit her at one of the homes where they were supposed to be receiving care, Jay was exposed to verbal abuse by the people in charge of the homes. She said it was very traumatizing for her. And so she started to refuse food. she used to keep to herself. She used to cry continuously. And she told me that she wanted to end her life. Remember that J was just 16. Now let's move to the story of W. W watched his mother being shouted at and beaten many times by his father, her husband. Nothing the mother ever did was ever good enough. His father would come home drunk and unable to cater to the family. Last week, he was knocked down by a car. At his funeral, 17-year-old J kept congratulating all members of the family, laughing hilariously and showing no appropriate emotion to the father's death. The diagnosis, of course, was major depression with psychosis. Now let's look at the story of A. A's family was a happy one. All that he needed was provided for him and his siblings as and when due. Last year, A's family got upgraded as his father got a new job with a lot of money. They decided to move houses, just like Dr. Ajurotutu said, so they were living in Lekki, they moved to Banana. They also changed the children's schools without carrying the children along. I mean, they said, we have more money, we can, what do children know? Just change their schools. It's for the best. A, who used to be the top of his class, started to struggle as his grades started dropping significantly. A had no friends as the other children avoided and even bullied him. A started to bully other children. He became defiant to authority, including calling the teacher stupid. He's currently on suspension rather. A has what we call situational depression. Now, who is a child? According to UNICEF and according to the United Nations Convention on the Rights of the Child, any human below the age of 18 is a child. We've heard what depression is. For many years, while I worked as a resident doctor at the Yaba Psychiatric Hospital, I had seen so many patients with depression. But there was one day that I met a young lady with depression. And it changed how I looked at the condition. In fact, when I got home, I wrote an article and I titled it, "The Day I Met Depression." It hits different when you see differently. And when you understand that this thing can wear different colors, it can come in different shapes, different forms. When Dr. Akinola was speaking, she spoke about many years ago when she worked as a young doctor in a hospital. She didn't have the skills at the time to identify it. Many years ago, as an emergency doctor at Bagada, there was this very old woman who was brought in. She just lost her best friend. And after she lost her best friend, she had so many complaints. She had headache, she had abdominal pain, she had chest pain, and they ran all the tests. What did we find? Nothing. They had taken to all the spiritual homes. They had prayed, done deliverances. Unfortunately, that woman died. Years later, as a young resident doctor, I just thought about it. Depression. All that we needed was a specialized form of care, and she most likely would have still been with us today. And so depression is different things to different people. But of course, we identified by saying that there are core symptoms, mood, energy, interest, all low, and additional symptoms of poor sleep, poor appetite, loss of libido, feelings of hopelessness, worthlessness, helplessness, suicidal ideation, guilt feelings, suicidal thoughts, suicidal attempts. Of course, we must also realize that it's not only with depression that people decide to end their lives. Let's move on to the next slide and let us see what depression looks like. If some of you know Emanuela once said, "This is not my real face." And so some people smile. Some people look like they have it all together. But deep inside, behind closed doors, they are struggling with depression. It's even more interesting these days when we have the condition called smiling depression, functional depression, max depression, where people are able to keep pushing, keep showing up in spite of their own difficulties. What do we know about depression in children? I think it's important that we understand that about 50% of children at the age of 14 are likely to have a mental health condition. 3% of children and teenagers between the ages of 3 and 17 have depression. Of course, depression is more common in adolescents than in children. Remember when you were an adolescent, you were growing so rapidly. You were growing breasts, you were growing hair, you were having changes that you were not sure about. Adolescents struggle a lot more, especially in this day and age of social media, where we leave a lot of our children to their own devices. Children are constantly comparing themselves with other children. Children don't like themselves, and children consider even ending their own lives. Of course, in children with physical health conditions, like I spoke about earlier, they're more likely to have depression. Depression can be caused by what we call an interplay of biological, it may be genetic, or because of an illness, psychological issues such as trauma. And children and adolescents go through a lot of trauma. Is it the trauma that parents cause through domestic violence? Is it sexual violence? Is it physical violence? Is it neglect? Is it the economy? Even the economy is concerning to children. Moving a child from a school that the child used to enjoy to another school because as parents you can't afford it and you don't involve the child in that decision making can be traumatic for that child. These days, because there's a lot on social media, children are comparing themselves to other people. Of course, social factors, again, parents, divorce, unemployment, poverty, the death of a loved one, the arrival of a new child. Do you know that the arrival of a new child can make another child become depressed? Especially if you're not carrying that other child along and that child feels neglected. Environmental factors, family dysfunction, all of this can cause depression. What are some of the risk factors for depression in children? And we must pay attention. Changing to a new school. It's not always necessary. You must always encourage your children to speak to you and ask them questions. How do you feel about this? What do you think? This is what I think. Bring them to the table. In our days, decisions were taken for us. These days, children want to be carried along. Of course, at the end of the day, you will take your decision. But let them know that they were taken into consideration. Of course, we must talk about conflict in the home. I remember seeing a little child once, 6-year-old, and I asked him, tell me about your mother and father. And he said, my father is always shouting at my mother. And when I called the father in and I said, this is what your son said, he said, no, I'm not shouting, I'm just correcting. I said, no, that's not how your child sees it. You're shouting at his mother, and his mother is seen as helpless. Domestic violence, physical assault, children in especially difficult circumstances, children in correctional facilities, orphans, children who are bullied. Bullying is such a big deal. In January this year, I saw this 6-year-old child who had to be brought from abroad. And at the end of the day, I found out that he was bullying. That, had affected the child so badly. Children who deal with ill health or who see their parents go through ill health, parental separation or divorce, starting school, academic stress, athletic performance, relationships with peers, friends and opposite gender, sleep deprivation. How do we know that children are depressed? And the biggest answer is that sometimes we may never know. The child may be struggling and you will not know. And so you must know your children. Know them well. Be their best friends. Ask them questions. We may notice a decreased interest in favorite activities. They have problems maintaining relationships. They are extremely sensitive to rejection or failure. The child fails and you're still asking them questions and they burst into tears. Sometimes it's frequent absences from school or a sudden decline in grades. Sometimes the child just says, I have tummy ache. You've carried the child to like 3 different doctors. They can't find anything. It may be anxiety, it may be depression. Frequent sadness, tearfulness, or crying. The child may actually express hopelessness. I am tired and I want it all to end. Low energy, low self-esteem, increased irritability. For younger children, they may throw more tantrums. They may avoid eating or start eating excessively, or they may not be able to sleep. They may be obsessed or talk about death a lot. Or they may watch things, they may watch horror or be more able to tolerate violence on TV. They may talk about running away or run away from home. They may isolate themselves and they may have problems concentrating. There may also be increased risk-taking behavior. A child who you knew used to be very careful before, all of a sudden you say that, oh, the neighbor said they saw him smoking, they saw him drinking, or he just jumps in a car. Things that he would not normally do. Feelings of worthlessness, of self-hatred. Some children may turn to substances of abuse, and some may have trouble making decisions. Let's move on to the next slide. My topic today, of course, is about how we can prevent childhood and adolescent depression. The biggest way to prevent is that we must first of all know. You can't improve what you don't measure. And so if you don't know what depression looks like, if you don't know what it sounds like, if you don't know what it is dressed in, how do you want to help children who are struggling? And so the first thing I say to us is the 4 L's. Learn about it. What is depression? Beyond being a word. You must look out. Look out for the children around you. Your own children, children of friends, children in the churches or the mosque that we go to. You must listen when these children open their mouths to speak to you. And so don't dismiss them and say, you're a child. What are you going through? What do you know about life? That's what most adults say. What have your eyes seen? But you see, many times the shege that the eyes of these little children have seen, we probably didn't see it when we were growing up. And so listen to them in a kind, compassionate, and non-judgmental manner. Thank you for telling me. How do you want me to help you? Is there anything else you'd like me to know? Is there anything you don't want me to tell anyone else? And then, of course, we must link children and adults with sources of support. If you don't have the requisite skills to help these children, get them a professional who can help them. I know that you may find resistance from parents and caregivers who say, oh, there's nothing wrong with my child. I mean, look at that case. A old medical doctor. The family members refused, largely because of shame and stigma. I can tell you that's what it was. What will people say if they hear that our relative is still in the psychiatric hospital? We must spend time with our children. To a child, time is very important. To a child, love is spelled time. These days, children tell you, you're so busy, mommy, you're always on your phone, you're always on one meeting or another. Give your children time. You may not have money to give them. You may not be able to send them to the fanciest of schools. Give them time. Spend time with them and find out what is happening in their lives. Know their friends. Know the challenges that they're having in school. It's also very important that you let them express themselves. I once had a 20-year-old patient. The mother said to me, he cannot have an opinion. He's a child at 20. When a 5-year-old child will tell you, mommy, please listen to me. I want to tell you something. Let them express themselves. Encourage positive habits. And if there's one thing I want you to teach your children to be kind. We need children who are kind, children who see us, children who understand the struggles that we go through as parents. We need our children to be kind. protect your children from stressful environments as much as you can. There's something happening somewhere, you don't want them to hear about it, turn off the news. Because children also get agitated when they see a lot of things that are going on that are negative. Protect them, give them the information that they need, but don't overwhelm them. Support your child. You know, there's something that some children say to their parents, "Mommy, you don't believe me." It hurts when a child says that to a parent. That means it's not just happening, it's been happening. "Mommy, you don't believe me? Mommy, are you not proud of me?" We must support the family too and the community. And so I'm happy that Dr. Reachout spoke to that earlier on. You must get professional help if and when necessary. Don't run away from it. The help that you give that child today may be the step that that child needs. There are many people, many families whose children have ended their own lives. It's also very important that we equip our children with soft skills. The skills like Dr. Reachout spoke about, resilience. We know that our children these days are not as resilient as we were. You must teach them to be resilient. Stop doing everything for your child. They can't do it by themselves. They can't do it. Let me help them. Let them learn process. You know, one day I sat in a session and I'll start to round up. This child had beaten the father at home. Then they eventually got someone to overpower the child. They tied the child up and they brought him. And so one day the parents came and he came into the office. He saw his parents. He just looked at them and he walked away. I said, "Do you know these people?" He said, "I know them." I said, "Won't you say anything to them?" I said, "Now you will go out and you will come back in and you do the proper thing." So he went out, he came in and he said, "Good morning." And so the conversation went, "You want to go back to school?" He said, "Yes." He has a first degree, he wants to go for a master's. "How do you want this to happen?" He said, "They will pay." I said, "Who will pay?" He said, "Them." I said, "Just like that?" He said, "They have the money, they will pay." I said, "Imagine they don't have the money." He said, "They can't tell me that. They will pay." I said, "Oh, imagine, God forbid, something happens to them, they die." He said, "Well, if they can't pay, then I'll go and steal." And then I was like, "Is there any other way you can raise this money?" He said he doesn't know any other way. I said, "Have you heard of scholarships?" Many of the children, when helped, become entitled. They can't think. If you don't do it, it won't get done. So let us teach our children the skills of resilience, of communication, of emotional intelligence, and of assertiveness. We must teach them to know and love themselves and to be mindful and kind to others as well. As parents, please don't live in denial. We know that nobody likes a negative label, but it's important that you face your problem. The reason why many things thrive in a community or an environment like ours is because we are all working in silos. Everyone doesn't want the other person to know that they have a problem. Well, look at your neighbor. Look at your neighbor, left, right.
And I open the book of James, chapter 1, verse 2 to 8. I receive it from my sister of the invisible one. Where he said, my brethren, count it all joy whenever you see yourself in diverse temptations, knowing fully well that your temptation is under perseverance, but allow patience to perform a perfect function. Then you will realize that it is patience that suffers solution. And when any of you lack wisdom, ask from God, who give liberally, and he will give it unto you without hesitation. But ask in faith, without wavering. Because he that wavered is like the wind of the sea, blowing up and down and being tossed. And such a wavered-minded person should not expect anything good from God. Because a double-minded man is an unstable man in all his ways. I regained another 25%, making 50. Hope started building from depression to great restoration. Then I say, okay, Father, if I decided to follow this, what would be my reward from this depression situation? I didn't know that there is a salary before God. And the salary of God, in a clarity way, confirmed to me from Zechariah chapter 9, 11 to 13. That was marvelous that night. When God was speaking to me that, according to the covenant I made with you, sealed with blood, that I will free your prisoners from the waterless pit of death back to the place of safety. You prisoners that still has hope. And I say this to you this very day, that for each of your trouble shall be covered with double blessing. I'm concluding now by saying this, all these things were said to me in theory like H2SO4 in a theoretical chemistry class as a day. But by faith, I moved them to practical laboratory, crystallized them, separate salt from salt, and today I'm enjoying nitrogen gas of freedom. So I want to encourage us that even in your total depression, Revelation 2:10-11 is your antidote. Thou shalt not fear what thou shalt suffer. Behold, the devil will cast some of you into some temptations in order for your faith to be tested. And you can be in prison for 10 days. But be truthful to the point of death, and the crown of success shall be given to you at the end. That he that get ear should listen to what the Spirit is saying unto the churches, because he that overcometh would never be affected with the second death. That depression is supposed to take my life, almost taking my life, not even supposed. But to the glory of God, the almighty formula of God versus almighty formula of educational system competed with each other and set me free. Because under physical institution of educational scheme, the almighty formula there for simultaneous equation is minus b plus or minus square root 4ab all over 2a, which a good student can use to work out mathematics. But under National University of Life, where I belongs to, under invisible lecturer, where concentration and meditation can graduate you in a tickle of an eye, where God is the pro-chancellor, the almighty formula there is D over S divided by T is equal to B, meaning disappointment over sorrows divided by temptation equals to blessings. And today, I give God the glory that for having God as a supernatural father over my destiny, I recover from that depression to salvation today.
Wow. Thank you very much, sir. Okay. I think we'll proceed from here. During the session, of course, we would have more opportunities. I'd like to invite on stage our esteemed mother of the day, Chief Consultant, Psychiatrist, Federal Neuropsychiatrist, Yaba, Dr. Mrs. Oluwafumilayo Akinola.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon once again. So we've heard so much today from our two speakers, and so I'm just supposed to give admonition and counsel to the public. So after we've heard all that stuff, what am I going to say? Dr. Biri is smiling at me. you know. But so I think the two speakers, they've talked to us generally, adults, and when you talked about children having depression. So what do I want to say? I think she also said something about it, at least a little bit. We must know, particularly our children, that their capacity, they do have the capacity to do so many things, but it seems they're not channeling their energy into the right place. Half of the time they're on social media. So all the things they're supposed to be doing, they are not doing. So we must be there. She has told us we must be friends with our children. Then we must teach them, and we must show them by example what life is all about. Life is not remote control. You know, that's what we all see now. Even your fridge will tell you there's no more bread inside the fridge. You need to buy bread. You need to buy egg. Alexa, put on music. You put on microwave. Everything is just, and life is not like that. So we must, well, they are our children, so we must know how we can connect with them and teach them. And we must remember that one of the most significant symptoms of mental illness is change. Change in behavior. Change in that lifestyle, that person. So you might not know what is going on, but you know that there's something different about this individual. Even when it's, most women, even men, you know that when you have a child, what are the first steps that the child will take? It's the neck control that will start first, isn't it? Then you see that the baby will roll on the bed. They want to start moving. Then gradually the baby wants to sit. They say by 6 months, the baby should be able to sit without support, learning to crawl, to walk. So there's a progression. So when there's a baby that is not doing all that, everybody knows there's something wrong with this baby. So what is the next action? I remembered when somebody close to me, she was on maternity leave, she was going to resume work. So I called her, how are you, how's the baby, and all that and all that. She said, mommy, the baby is not eating. You have a newborn that is not feeding well. There's something wrong with that child. So I said, there's something wrong with that baby. You have to take the baby to the hospital. She was like, Then I said, you need to go before you resume work. And she went. You know, that baby had a hole in the heart. Some things are standard. So it's the same thing. If a child is not feeding well, cannot suckle a newborn, there's something wrong with that child. So I told her, so when we see a change in behavior in our children, in our friends, in people that we work with, that is a pointer that there's something wrong. We are not making a diagnosis. Please don't get me wrong. Something might be going on with that individual. So what do? We encourage the person to go for assessment. Just talk to somebody, that's all. You can even start by talking to the person yourself. So what's going on with you? I noticed that, you are sleeping more and more at work. You are no more concentrating. You don't turn in your, assignment to your job and all that. Let's find out. And from whatever that person says, you begin to think that, I might not be able to undo this. Encourage them to seek for help. In medicine, we talk about prevention. We talk about early diagnosis. We talk about treatment, then prevention of disabilities. So once we get to it early, it's like all the cancers. They will say, why didn't you come in early? If it was first stage, we would have been able to remove everything. So it's the same thing with mental illness. Notice the significant symptom is change in behavior. So let us pay attention and let us learn to listen actively to one another. Sometimes you think you are listening, you are not listening. Your mind is not there because you have your own issues. But once you are talking, and let's just be, listen actively to what is going on. Sometimes people are not saying anything, but they are saying a lot. Because that individual, the person that is usually very chatty, they'll come and say, and he or she is answering you. So what did you say? This is not the person that I know, what's going on. Then listen actively. Let me give you a typical example. I was with a junior friend, she's a nurse. So I was going to drop her somewhere in Alausa. So she was talking, I wasn't listening because I didn't want Lasma to catch me in Alausa. So I was looking for where I was going to drop her at the appropriate bus stop. So she said, da, 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 da. Then I went to the doctor, so the doctor said I should go and do ECG. So that's for the heart, for an 8-year-old. That was the only thing that caught my attention. Then I looked at her, I said, what did you say the doctor said? What is wrong with your daughter? So say it again. And she said it again. So the father noticed she would just stand and she would go off. I said, that's a seizure disorder. It is not the heart though. Don't go and do it. Go and do an EEG. That is what you're supposed to do. Intentional listening. You know? Just sometimes the way the person will talk to you about either the children, you ask about the children, the woman that is always happy to talk about her child now. She's like, God will help us. It is well. You know that there's something going on. So learn to ask further questions, be there for them, listen actively. Then what do? You refer. Let them go and see the professionals. And you must tell them, let them know that because you see the doctor does not mean they're going to make a diagnosis. Or, okay, let's assume the diagnosis was made, depression. Sometimes, Dr. Ajiro Tutu told us, we have different stages, mild, moderate, and severe depression. Most times, mild and moderate. If you can have good social support, and we do talking therapy, that individual might never have to go on medication. But we do know from research that most times, medication and talking therapy work very well. But the idea is we need to know so that we can tell people. So please go and see the doctor. It's not the end of the world. The earlier we know, I told you, depression is treatable and it's quite cheap. But that is when we get it early. Because by the time it gets to the severe one, severe depression, most likely that person is no more eating, it's not talking, it's not moving. So you have to admit, you set up line, you do tests. Sometimes you use 3 or 4 medications before you can get that person out. The person will pay for admission fee, something that we will have handled. Maybe just with talking, or maybe just one medication at the beginning, and you do follow up. So I've talked about knowing the change, talking to people, intentional listening. Remember that our children do have the capacity to learn, but they are learning the wrong things. So we must be there to teach them and put them through. Then when we now find out, so eventually get that individual to see the doctor or the counselor or the psychologist, and they say there is actually something wrong. Then it is better that we accept it. When we accept something, whatever is going on, it is already 50% solved. Because then you put in your heart and your soul to, okay, so what is the solution? But when you don't agree, I'm still seeing somebody right now, by the time I start talking, but you know that, she'll start talking. In fact, the husband had to tell her, keep quiet, let the doctor talk. Let us know what is going on. All these things that you're having, depression has different faces. You are depressed. Your body is shaking from inside. You can't sleep at night. You cannot eat. You just sit down there and you are crying. So please, what is that? And you're not going on with your life. You can't do anything. All the things you love to do, you're no longer doing them. So what are we saying? Don't let's hide under the, it's like you put a finger like this. Can I hide behind the finger? It's not possible. So my advice is let's accept. When we accept it, then we get appropriate solution. If we don't, we'll be going up and down. Whereas it's just something very simple that we need, and the individual will get well. So change, let's seek for help immediately. Let us accept the findings, then what is the way forward? I think one of my favorite sentences is that there's nothing under the sun that does not have a solution. Do I have agreement in the house? It might not come immediately, but if we stay with it long enough, we will get a solution. So we must teach our children, and we ourselves, we must remember. Don't let us rush into things. Okay, so what did the doctor say? You have done the test. You are free to seek a second opinion. There's nothing wrong with that. but go to the appropriate places, please. So this is what they think is wrong. So what should I do? What is my part to play in this? Don't let's deny. Don't hide under the rock. They'll say the ostrich, they'll put their head in the sand and their backside and everything is eye up, everybody's looking. That's what you do when you do not accept what the doctor or your counselor or your therapist is telling you. Accept. So the next thing is, so what do I do? What is my own part to play? What part do I have to play in all these things? And I'm sure we have been told, being sick, having depression is not a moral weakness. You can't snap out of it. Sometimes you know all these things, but you can't help yourself, you know. As I'm talking to my client right now, she'll say, it's not easy. I said, I know it's not easy, but the point is it can be done. Once you agree, I'm depressed and I need to get out of this thing. So doctor, what do I have to do? Right now, you can't help yourself. Take a little bit of medication for a while, then we'll continue with talking therapy. So these are the things that I want to leave with all of us, with all that we have heard today. We also have a part to play. Please accept things. Being depressed is not a moral weakness. People can't snap out of it. They need our help. Sometimes the help they need from us is just being there. The fact that you are there, you go to their house every day or every other day. I couldn't go to her house yesterday. I've told her I will come to her house today. All she wants is just somebody to talk to. And what do? I just sit down there. She will say, oh, okay. But you have to do this. Use your medication for now. So it's encouragement. So we are going to have a healthy nation despite everything that is going on. Then one other thing. We are talking about coping skills. It was ability to bounce back, resilience. Then we must know one major coping skills. When things happen to us, the solution is one, is either we can do something about it, isn't it? And the other one, we cannot do anything about it. So when those ones we can't do anything about, what do we do? Please don't kill yourself. There are some problems you cannot solve by yourself. Let's give a typical example. When our university, they go on strike, can the student and the parents do anything about that? We can only appeal to the lecturers and they will tell us no. But when a child fails, has 3-4 carryovers, who is going to do that work? So the parents must go to school, go and see the course advisor. What is going on here? Help me. Okay, so your child has failed 3 courses. And so what is the solution? Can he come for summer school? So he has to read. Can I get somebody, maybe there's a graduate officer in the department, can they teach him? Can they lecture him? You see that we are finding solution. But about the lecturers going on strike, I'm a Belon Simone. We will pray that God will minister to government to answer them, isn't it? And they too will agree to whatever the government is giving. So that is what life is all about. So when things happen, can I solve it? Sit down and think. I can't solve this. Can I get help from people? Yes, you can. So let us go and seek help. And please, go to the appropriate places. Don't go to quacks that say they did course for 2 weeks, 3 weeks, and all that. Go to people that are properly trained. You see people that have been training for 20, 30 years. Then you go and go to somebody you attend, you let somebody that trained for 2 weeks to manage you. There will be a lot of difference. So, and at the end of the day, you spend more money. You know, when you go to Babalawos, they will say, go and bring white cloths, bring goat, go bring that one. You will spend all that, and the patient won't get well. Then you come to psychiatric hospital, and they say, go and buy drug, do medication. You say, you spent all your money, because you've given Babalawo the goat and the palm oil and the white cloth, and they were not able to do anything. So God will help us. We will not be ill. Before it becomes bad, we will be able to identify that I have issues. Remember, you know yourself. So once you know that, what's going on with me? I can't sleep. I don't feel like eating. I don't want to talk. I don't even want to attend those parties, you know. You know, some people, they have 5 geles in their car as they are moving from one party to the other. Then you get to their home, they are there. There's something wrong with that woman. until proven otherwise. So please, a change, let's take that step. There is no shame. There is no stigma. Please, I tell people they don't want to. I say, look, what is the important thing to you? The important thing is that you live. Your life is productive. Your child is productive. So who cares what people say? Whatever you do, people will talk. There's nothing on that. That adage that says, unless you did not do it. As long as you have done it, as long as you've gone somewhere, somebody, somewhere has seen you. So they will talk. People will talk. If you walk with your head, they will talk. If you walk with your feet, they will talk. So let them talk now. But you are happy, you are productive. Your children are doing well. So if your children have to go and see the psychiatrist, please, there's no shame. Remove all that stigma thing and let it go. Let us seek for help in the appropriate place, and God will help us. Thank you.
Can we appreciate her once again, please? Thank you very much, ma'am. All right, our time is fast spent, so we would move straight to the panel session. We'll be having a panel session now. I'd like to invite on stage our panelists. I'll start with Professor Kayode Makinde. You're welcome, sir. Dr. Mrs. Oluwafumi Akiola. Dr. Omotayo Ajiro Tutu. Okay, for our final panelist, you see, I'm actually trying to make sure that I get the right pronunciation this time around so that I don't make that mistake again. She's smiling because I see that the typo is actually on the document that I have here. Yes. I'd like to invite on stage Dr. Bojubola Abiri. I got it. Finally. Okay. All right, as much as we have questions lined up for our panelists, I would crave your indulgence to please note some questions down that you might want to ask whilst they are giving us answers to the questions that we have listed here. We would give the opportunity to have one or two questions from the audience, all right, so that we would all pick learnings from here at the end of today. All right, so I would start with the first question that I have here. What are the primary triggers of depression in children and adolescents? What are the primary triggers of depression in children and adolescents? And how can early intervention be implemented? primary triggers of depression in children and adolescents, and how can early intervention be implemented? Thank you, Doc.
Thank you for the question. I think that despite giving an age definition that children are any group of people between the ages of 0 to 18, it's also very important to look at children in categories, what psychologists will refer to as their developmental stages. And so I think it would be tidier to say, early childhood, middle, and possibly late childhood. And at those different, times of children's lives, they have different things that are, bothering them, or that are, that are weighing them down. So for instance, if I started with adolescents, a psychologist would refer to adolescence as, the face of identity versus role confusion. An adolescent is trying to find out, who am I? Who are my friends? What are the things that matter to me? And so at that time in their lives, they're looking at, friends, influences from, the environment, from family, from TV, from social media. And so some of the things that they struggle with may not be the same things that a little child at 3-year-old might struggle with. And so adolescents, would struggle with things like, identity, being wanted, being accepted into a group. Do my friends think that I'm cool enough? I'm not doing well at sports. I'm not doing well at my academics. So those are some of the things that, people of that age will struggle with. If you look at children, younger children, if you look at a child between maybe 1 and 5, all that those kind of children need is they want to be loved, they want to be held, they want to be fed. And so if a child is able to get all of those things constantly and consistently, for a child, that spells love. As an adult, I think back as when I was a child, and when I would hear the door open at night and my mother would come into the room, and what would she do? She would take the cover cloth and she would put it over me. For me, at that time in my life, that was love. It wasn't about whether I was able to, have any fancy clothes or fancy dresses. It was just the constancy of being fed, being clothed, being sheltered, and having my needs catered to. If you then look at a child between the ages of 6 and 11, so I've looked at the adolescents, 12 and above, I've looked at a child between 1 and 5. But if you then look at a child between the ages of 6 and 11, what that child is going through at that point in their lives is that they're trying to form their self-esteem. And so anything that, targets or hinders that child's self-esteem at that point in time, negative self-talk, negative comments from family, from friends, from teachers. A child does something, a child can pick up something and say, "Mommy, look at this Eiffel Tower." And while you look at it, you're like, well, it looks nothing like the Eiffel Tower, but you must commend the fact that the child even has an idea of what the Eiffel Tower is. The child is able to think, to imagine. You get what I mean? And so the child must be commended. So at that phase in life, what that child is battling with is self-identity, self-esteem, needing to be seen, to be validated, and to be, to be loved. And so at different stages of children's life, children struggle with different things. If children don't fully navigate or negotiate these areas, they can come up as problems, and the child may actually become depressed. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that well-articulated response. I would want to delve into it a little bit more. I like the part, and this just dovetails into my next question. I like the part where you made mention of academics and social media. As one of the major factors that these teenagers, that they struggle with. So I would want us to go into a bit more granulated details about that, the academics aspect and then the social media aspect, and also look at ways that we can help to, to obliterate this, if possible. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Well, we all know what is happening now. Academic comes first. That is what is supposed to come first. But over the years now, a lot of parents have been battling with children concentrating on academics and the role social media have actually played. I tell you, for example, a parent a young child, an adolescent or teenager preparing for JAMB was sent to JAMB classes, and right there while the teacher was teaching, she was purely on social media. And there were so many of them there. And it takes a lot. And now it comes to, it starts with the parents there. Because now we provide phones for them so much early, from early age. I tell you, I have my boys, 10, 11, there's nothing they can't do on social media, with the phone. So a lot of it comes from the parenting style, which we talked about. And when we talk about parenting style, we talk about 4: authoritative, authoritarian, neglective, and permissive. Well, with the issue of discipline, which has eroded us now, compared to how different generations grew up, where academics was just purely the main. But the purpose of the phone is just to reach these children at the point in time. Then sophisticated phones came over time, which now even parents buy phones for them, whereby they just go onto different websites and do what they want to do. And even for academics, yes, one of the major problems that I also observe now is that even with the social media thing and some certain apps on those social, they don't read anymore. Maybe the professor will be able to shed more light. Now, when they give them assignments now, they just go on some certain chat GPT, and the answer is all out. With the row, just bind, and submit in class. There's nothing, any question they give now, they just go on ChatGPT, it gives you the answers, it gives you references and everything. And that's a major problem. Now you have to take into consideration different age grades, like Dr. Moju said. The exposure starts more from late childhood to adolescent. Now, in my practice, I've had the cause to work on an adolescent for porn addiction, pornographic addiction. So how did this guy started? The father was surprised. How the grandmother has an house help, and the house help has a phone. So the house help watches pornography. It was from that house help that he got exposed to it. So on getting home, he just went to his daddy's phone and logged on and started watching. So the daddy saw the father, where did this come from? And they called the children, and eventually admitted that he was the one responsible for that. So gradually he went on and went on. Then he took it to school. And from there, he started molesting other students. And he was expelled from that school. So off they went to another school. It happened again in that school. There and then, the parents